Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Fillon and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to talk about Jackson Holliday, who has been hitting the cover off the ball at AAA Norfolk, discuss his recent surge, and whether and how he could fit into the Orioles' plans for the second half of the season. We'll also quickly break down the Orioles as they enter the early portion of their post-All-Star break slate. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bonus of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. And as we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to welcome a new, or in this case, returning member of our Patreon community. And with that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, just want to welcome back Joe Adams into the fold. Happy to see him come back as a patron and re-enter the Discord. We missed him over there. So yeah, thanks a lot, Joe.
And as a reminder, you can sign up for our Patreon community for as little as $3 a month as a paying member. At the $5 and $10 levels, have access to bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself. We also update our top 50 prospect list monthly for patrons, and patrons of any paying level can access exclusive Discord channels on our Discord community. So you're going to want to check that out. And now we'll get into the main topic of tonight's episode, which is Jackson Holliday, who had an excellent weekend in Norfolk series against Nashville, going 4 for 8 over 3 games played with 2 homers and 2 walks. And this continues a trend in which Holliday has been scorching at the plate since coming off the IL in late June. He's appeared in 17 games and is slashing 316, 494, 614 in that span while walking 20 times and striking out just 15. He's had 18 hits total during that time period, 11 of which have been for extra base hits. And this is really the best that Holliday has looked at the plate since the Orioles optioned him back to Norfolk after a sluggish debut in the major leagues earlier this season. With the Orioles now in the post-All-Star break portion of their schedule and Holliday hitting the ball well at AAA, the question comes up, is Holliday closer to returning to the major leagues? But we'll focus first on his performance of late. Nick, since Holliday has come off the IL, it's been apparent that he looks really comfortable at the plate. What have you been seeing from him over the last 2 weeks or so?
A lot of good baseball. Also good to see him back at second base already, even if they're just easing him back in. I think that first game, he got removed early, and I saw a couple people freaking out. He's easing his way back into playing in the field after the injury, but it's happening sooner than I thought it would. They made it seem like it would be weeks of him just DHing, and it was like a week and a half or so. But yeah, you rattled off the numbers, great numbers, OPS and over 1100. Walks are actually up if you look at his numbers just in AAA, no MLB numbers, but just his AAA numbers before the injury versus after the IL stint. Walks are up a little bit, strikeouts are down a little bit. He's got a 186 WRC plus. That's fantastic. The 3 homers are also good to see. 2 of those did come on Friday when the Tides returned, when all of minor league baseball returned from their little break as well. But like I went back to that Baseball America article that they did a couple weeks ago, and they dove into the Kobe Mayo breakdown, and we talked about that article. But they also mentioned Holliday and did the same thing on a much smaller scale. And I don't know if we talked about that or not on that episode. I was mostly focusing on Kobe Mayo, but like with Holliday, the 2 things they highlighted in that specific article on things he needed to fix, some holes in his game, were struggles against velo up in the zone. And then Friday night, he went up against Joe Ross. In case you were wondering, Joe Ross still plays baseball. And like, make any Joe Ross jokes you want about how he's not that good of a ball player, but he does have like almost 500 MLB innings under his belt. But one of those home runs Holiday hit was actually a 94 mile per hour fastball up in the zone. So like that's obvious. You want to see that more consistently, but like that was good to see. And I like watching the prospect hitters, the young guys like Holiday, how they fare against the Joe Ross types, because like Joe Ross may not have the stuff to beat Jackson Holliday and these younger guys, but like they can outsmart these rookies. I feel like pretty much any night. So I like seeing how the young guys fare, and he fared pretty well, getting 2 home runs off of him. But it seemed like the end zone contact rate and velo against fastballs up in the zone, specifically against right-handed pitchers, were two of Holiday's weaknesses. And I've been kind of checked out this weekend, and then got slammed at work today. So this was a quick and dirty search. So somebody going to have to fact check me on this. But I believe I looked at, again, from pre-IL to post-IL, just in AAA, and Jackson Holliday's like launch angle on Baseball Savant, and up in the zone, it's I don't really see any changes there, except it was like, I think before the break, it was on pitches up and in, he was driving those balls in the air. And then since he returned from the IL, it's been the complete opposite, where it's balls up and away that he's driving in the air. Again, someone have to fact check me on that search on Baseball Savant that I did real quickly, about 10 minutes or so. But we don't have access to a lot of those better numbers that the organization does. And hopefully he is improving in those two areas. But just this weekend, it looked like he was certainly trending in the right direction in those two specific areas. So it's good to see. He's a 20-year-old kid making adjustments and improving. So love to see it.
Absolutely. And it's just funny as we near the trade deadline how underrated Jackson Holliday is at this point, just because I feel like 36 plate appearances in the major leagues have made him go from like best prospect in baseball, or at least one of them, to fans are like Tarek Skubal for Jackson Holliday, Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basayo. Like the trade rumors that like the Orioles are really going to trade Jackson Holliday in the next week or so, just because he struggled in the majors, is silly, because he's been phenomenal since going back down. He's got more walks than strikeouts. That's what Jackson Holliday does. He's going to have an incredible walk rate. He's not going to strike out a ton. He's got a great hit tool, and he's still getting adjusted to this level of baseball. But I mean, I think people are sleeping on his power still. He's got a, ISO of 220, which is pretty good for a guy who can't really hit for power. He's got 24 doubles, 10 home runs, 8 stolen bases, only been caught one time. He's back playing second base. He's doing everything that the organization could ask of him. He struggled in the majors when he came up with the swing and miss, especially up in the zone, but that's not happening anymore since he came down. The leg kick is less pronounced. He'll be back this year, and he'll be on the playoff roster in October.
There was a really good article recently in The Athletic written by Cody Stavenhagen, and it talked about how the gap between AAA and the majors is growing. And I bring this up because I think it's relevant in Holliday's case. Some of the points made in that article are that fastballs are not as good and they're not thrown as hard in AAA as they are in the majors. Hitters in AAA also don't see as many sliders as hitters in the major leagues. And when they do, those sliders tend to be a little bit slower than what they see in the major leagues. And for anyone that has not checked out this article yet, I would encourage you to go over and do so over at The Athletic. But keeping that in mind, and it is something that we have seen in the last couple of years because of those factors, and something else that's mentioned in that article, which is the automated ball strike system. We've talked a lot on this show about how that has tilted the International League in the last couple of years towards hitters. So I think we know with the data that's available that AAA is a much more hitter-friendly environment right now than the major leagues is. And with that in mind, how do you guys reconcile what you see from Holliday's stats versus whether or not he's actually ready to come back to the majors?
It's hard to say, but I mean, if you look at Gunnar Henderson, who obviously MVP caliber player right now, Jackson Holliday's numbers at AAA are very similar to what Gunnar was doing. And obviously, if it's a little more offensive oriented now, then take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But Holliday's doing it at a younger age. and I still think he's an elite prospect. Maybe he doesn't take that next level at the major league level like Gunnar has. Maybe he's more on base oriented than slugging oriented, but those guys playing up the middle together the next 5, hopefully 10 years, it's going to be a lot of fun for Orioles fans. So keeping receipts of all these people saying trade Jackson Holliday right now.
Yeah, I mean, so you can take his numbers with a small grain of salt, but not enough salt to taste. But like, I go back to the age, like Bob referenced there. He's still only 20 years old, and it's what he does well. It's okay. He's not making enough contact in the zone, but he's not chasing. That's huge for me, in my opinion. I'm no hitting expert, but I think that stands out. If he's like flailing at pitches and chasing has this enormous chase rate, it's below MLB average chase rate against lefties and righties. So he's making, when he does make contact, it's good contact. He's hitting the ball hard. He's just not hitting it in the air as much right now. And then he's not chasing pitches, and he's doing all of this at I don't know, what is it, like 4.5? I have to pull up the age gap there, AAA, like what the average AAA player is right now. He's like what, 4.5 years younger, 5 years younger than the average AAA player. Again, going up against, the quality of stuff isn't as good, and it's deteriorating, it seems like, over the last couple of years. But it's still like, you go up against a guy like Joe Ross who has 500 MLB innings under his belt, and you hit 2 home runs off of him. Like, you take note of that. I just think that if it's a matter of making contact in the zone and lifting the ball, but you're already such a disciplined hitter, I take a lot of comfort in that. And that it's going to take time he's got to see more of that quality stuff, which is not going to happen at AAA level. But once he sees more of that quality stuff, he got beat down in the major leagues. He failed, probably, like a lot of people said, for the first time in his entire life. He probably failed at baseball. He went back down to the minor leagues and then got hurt. I don't know what his injury history is, but I don't think it's pretty extensive. And so now to see him hitting better than before even and keeping that discipline, I'm remaining pretty optimistic about what he can do in the major leagues once it clicks. He's just got to see that better stuff for more than 2-3 weeks.
And like Nick said, not a hitting coach, but yeah, if you're not chasing, to me, someone with his abilities at his age, swing and miss in the zone seems like a very fixable or just developed tool. Like he'll develop that as he gets older and more reps against the quality of pitching at the major leagues.
When you look at the Orioles lineup right now across the board, I think second base is a weak spot offensively that does jump out at you. And it would seem that if the Orioles want to try to remedy that problem, they can do so internally. They don't have to go out and trade for a second baseman to try to get more offensive production, which is why, frankly, I don't think we're hearing a whole lot about it leading up to the trade deadline. Now, to the extent that it is a problem when you have one of the best lineups in baseball, it's debatable. But let's say the Orioles do want to try to plug in someone from AAA to get more offensive production out of their infield, be able to move guys around a little bit. There's seemingly one of 3 or possibly 2 or 3 ways they could go. They could bring Holliday back up, get him regular playing time at second base, and try to do what they did for him earlier this season. They could bring Connor Norby back up, or they could bring up Kobe Mayo and decide that Jordan Westberg is going to play second base more often down the stretch. When you consider those 3 scenarios, which one do you guys think would be the most likely?
Personally, it's all 3 for me. I mean, if I had it my way, Kobe would be third base, first base. Jackson would be second base. Connor Norby would be a Hayes replacement. Like, it's all right there for me. But we know that's not going to happen. We know they like their veterans, and they're not going to give up on players unless there's, trades that they can find with, whether it's the Braves who need outfield help or the Mariners who need bats of any sort whatsoever, the Marlins who could use a shortstop. Anyway, I don't think that's going to happen. So for me personally, I'm really frustrated that Kobe Mayo's not up already, honestly. I mean, he's been playing a lot at first base, so obviously we know it's happening soon. They're not going to wait till September, I don't think, to make that move. To me, something's not right with Mountcastle right now. He's struggling. He just he's not pulling the ball at all lately. He just seems out of it when I don't know if it's his knee, if the vertigo's flaring up, but something seems off. So I think Mayo would be playing some first base here in a perfect world. But I think what's going to happen is I think Norby will be a September expanded rosters when you get those 2 extra players. I think he could be a guy that gets one of those spots. Holliday, I mean, Mateo's been playing a lot of second base. Basically, whatever position Westberg's not playing is the weakest link. And Ramon Empire, as Vivek points out, he's been playing pretty well of late, but still, to me, that's an easy upgrade. So we'll give our predictions when Holliday will be up, but I think that's the inevitable move for second base at the end of the season, into the playoffs, and then into the future.
You mentioned Mountcastle, and I was going to bring him up as well. Like, all right, you've got. We're not assuming trades right now, right? With this conversation on what you do with them, it's extremely difficult. Jorge Mateo, it's been bad lately. I said on this show that when he went on the IL with the concussion, I was afraid that this was going to ruin his rhythm and like what was going to happen when he returned. And actually, it was, shout out Matt Kremnitzer actually tweeted this morning the numbers, so I didn't have to look them up for this to make this point. Mateo, before the IL stint, had a 106 WRC plus and 128 plate appearances. Since then, in 79 plate appearances, he has a 58 WRC plus. The speed, we know why he's on the roster, the speed and defense. I kind of agree that the speed's kind of useless if you can't get on base. He could be that late game substitution. He could be an impact player for you there. Ramon Arias, I don't know like what he's particularly going to bring over these other guys. But the wild card here for me is Mountcastle. And I don't want to jump on the guy just because, he's struggling right now and it's the trade deadline and we're eager to see prospects come up. But we've talked about this before a couple of times in the offseason when looking ahead 2-3 years down the road. And we've kind of always questioned how long is Ryan Mountcastle going to be around on this roster when you've got Kobe Mayo, Heston Kjerstad, who we assumed probably long-term could have been like a first base DH option, especially if Santander is going to stick around and you're going to keep Kjerstad around. But like Ryan Mountcastle, Ryan O'Hearn could be around
Samuel
for another
Basallo.
It goes on and on. And like, I'm concerned about Mountcastle as well. Like over the last month, the calendar month, he has a team worst 45 WRC plus. Jorge Mateo is 46. He's hitting 216. He has 1 home run in the last month. He's near the bottom in hard hit rate. I love the guy, but like, I almost wonder if there's another team calling about Mountcastle. Like, could the Orioles move Mountcastle at the deadline? Then Mayo can come up and play first base. Kjerstad has played a decent amount of first base too. Another way to get his bat in the lineup there. They're both very inexperienced at first base. You're definitely taking a hit defensively because Mountcastle has been pretty solid over there. But like, there's going to be a learning curve with those two guys. But could Mountcastle bring back some pitching? And like, and for Mountcastle's sake, if he goes to a park where that left field wall doesn't destroy him, it's clearly frustrating him. And it is clearly like the numbers don't lie. Like if anyone's been impacted by that wall more than anyone else, it's Ryan Mountcastle. If he's free from that to just be himself, unleash his poolside power, which he has completely abandoned. Bob referenced that. I didn't write down the exact numbers. His pool percentage is like in the teens when it was in like 40 something percent. That's non-existent now. It's like, is he trying to avoid the wall? Is it all in his head now? I don't know. But maybe like a change of scenery, new venue could probably do wonders for him and get the Orioles pitching back potentially. And the Orioles could turn to Mayo, open up another spot there. How likely is that? I don't know, but like it could be an option.
I mean, Cincinnati, if I'm Mountcastle, that's where I want to go. There's these rumors that they're selling here in the next week or so. Ryan Mountcastle for Frankie Montas and Nick Martinez. I don't know. Be good for him.
I kind of view Mountcastle the same way that I viewed Austin Hayes when we were having these conversations last year, which is that when you're winning at the major league level and you have a guy who seems to mean a lot to the clubhouse, as Hayes did and as Mountcastle does, you're not going to move him in the middle of a pennant race. It just isn't going to happen. I mean, we saw a few years ago what happened when the Brewers traded Josh Hader, and he wasn't pitching particularly well when they traded him. the Brewers sunk after that. And to what extent Hader being dealt had to do with that, you could debate. But, we saw plenty of evidence that it really threw things off in the clubhouse. I don't think the Orioles are going to want to do that midseason. Now, with that said, offseason, completely fair game. And I've been saying for a few years now that I think the Orioles have been looking ahead to when Mountcastle is going to be arbitration eligible and trying to figure out who can we line up behind him. And now they have possibly Heston Kjerstad. They have Kobe Mayo. They could decide to just pick up Ryan O'Hearn's player option, make him the primary first baseman next year. There's a lot of ways they can go in the offseason. I just don't see them doing it in season. As for how I kind of see this coming together, I get the sense that Mayo is going to get the call before Holliday does. For no reason other than that, I think the right-handed power bat really is needed right now. And you've talked about Mountcastle slipping. Jordan Westburg's hitting pretty well right now, but Mountcastle is slipping. Mateo is not hitting well. If you could just throw in another right-handed bat that gives you some power, even if Mayo only hits 240 to 250 the rest of the way, you'll take it. That's kind of where I see him having the advantage over Holliday.
I think it's two things that we don't know, and we can't know unless somebody told us, we asked the right people. It's going back to Jackson Holliday. Is he making those adjustments? Do the internal metrics, do the data the Orioles are looking at, is he improving in what they saw were his weaknesses in the major leagues when in his first call up? Is he improving in those areas? And if so, could he be that potential option? Versus Mayo, it's how does the organization view his defense? We know the spring training piece, that's a spring training piece. That is what it is. But realistically, behind closed doors, what's the conversation about his defense? I know how Twitter views his defense. They think he's the worst third baseman to ever play the game of baseball. There's somewhere in there is how the organization truly views his defense, and that we don't know. And if they think it's better, I made this point the last time we were on, I know he played first base a lot more this weekend, but it's they didn't move him to the outfield at all. He played a lot of third base this year. I don't think the organization is as down on his defense at third base. And if they aren't, then I think it makes it a little bit easier. And yeah, Kobe Mayo would get the call before Holliday. I think those are just two things that we don't know the answers to, and it makes I'm thinking about this a little bit more difficult on trying to guess on where they would go here. But
yeah, I don't think it's realistic that Mountcastle is traded in season. Same with someone was asking me what's the most you would give up for Tariq Skubal, which we might get to in the mailbag, but my answer there was probably not also realistic because it included a guy that's an all-star and playing every day for an Orioles, and contenders, they don't do that, and the Orioles are very conservative when it comes to subtracting from a contending team in season. So yeah, I lost the plot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they would move Mountcastle either. As we're just spitballing because we got nothing else to talk about.
Right.
We got three days of minor league baseball to review. There's one big thing happened. That's about it. But there are a lot of different options, and it's just I do think Mountcastle can even forget about can Mountcastle figure this thing out, right? Or can Mullins figure this thing out? Whoever figure it out. This team is still playing really good baseball and winning a lot of baseball games. So yeah, you don't want to rock the ship too much. Do you want to attack pitching and add a ton of pitching to this roster? Absolutely. But with the lineup, I think it's a little bit more delicate because we've seen this team hit some funks and it's been bad. They limped their way into the All-Star break. But at the same time, this team's set up pretty nicely as is. You don't need to make sweeping big changes to the lineup for this to be a World Series contending lineup. Pitching, different story, but yeah, it's only a couple more days till we find out for sure.
I just hope a team likes Hayes and Arias enough to give us something for him.
And we're going to have more
opportunities. Sorry.
We are going to have more on the trade deadline later this week as part of our mailbag episode. And it's worth noting we're recording this on Monday night, only 8 days from the trade deadline. So we're going to have a lot of coverage about the trade deadline leading up to that, including in our episode later this week on the mailbag. I'm going to wrap up this episode, though, with this question about Holiday, because I think it's worth pointing this out in this day and age where Rookie of the Year wins and service time factor into draft pick compensation. By my count, Holiday had 15 days on the active roster during his first stint. He had 34 at-bats during that time period. So in other words, he's currently 96 at-bats and or roughly 30 days away from losing rookie eligibility. That means that if the Orioles called him up now and he spent the rest of the year in the majors, he would definitely lose rookie eligibility before the year ended, not eligible for Rookie of the Year in 2025. Take that out of the equation entirely. Is that a factor for the Orioles in your mind, and should it be?
I think it is a factor. I think, especially for Holiday, because with Mayo, I don't think it is, nor should it be. I think you get him up here. Hopefully soon you get him the experience to get ready for the playoffs, to be a big part of that. For Holiday, personally, I don't think it necessarily should be, because I don't know, same thing, let him get adjusted and all that. But for me, I think September 2nd at home, start of a homestand against the White Sox. It's 28 days left in the season at that point, and I think you manage his at bats so he gets like 94 at bats in 28 days, and he'll be like the Colton Cowser of next year, where he's eligible for like a game or two, and you can try to get that draft pick like Gunnar did.
Yeah, and like as long as there's no major injuries, like you can keep him down. You don't have to worry about that. As long as you keep winning ball games and this offense keeps producing just enough to win those ball games, even when it's not clicking on some nights. Like if Connor Norby isn't traded, then he's still on the 40-man roster. You can also bring him up to fill in some of those at bats, so you don't have to bring up Holiday. And even if you think he's ready, you're like, it's not a necessity that he has to come up. And we can also, like Bob said, we can also bring him up at the end of the year. He could still play in the playoffs, right? Do the playoffs don't count. So yeah, we can still come up, get some extra time, get some extra at bats. And if we think he's going to be a productive piece for the playoffs, we add him to the playoff roster. If not, he doesn't make the playoff roster. Oh, well, he got another taste. He's up next year, opening day, starting second baseman, potential rookie of the year again next year. So I imagine it is under pretty heavy consideration when they're making these decisions.
Yeah, I would like to think that whatever decision they're going to make is going to be in service of what gives them the best chance to have the American League East wrapped up and be successful in the playoffs. But whether or not Holiday is going to be that much of a difference maker is debatable. So I do kind of fall on the side of them doing what Bob suggested, which is waiting until early September to bring him up and probably playing him in a platoon role that's going to keep his total at bats for the season below 130. And then he'll be Rookie of the Year eligible going into 2025. And I'll throw out one last question here from Vivek. Which player will have the most impact in your lineup, Mayo or Holiday? So let's just take that as the Orioles roster right now without, much change to it other than whatever player you're getting rid of to bring up Holiday or Mateo. Which one of those two has more impact?
In general, Mayo, but because Holiday would be replacing mostly Mateo, I think that might make a bigger difference as far as, if Mayo's in for more of a Mountcastle Arias replacement, it's a little less, improvement to be made there. So both?
I just think it's Mayo. I think that ceiling is massive. Defense aside, just look at the bat. Like he doesn't hit cheapies. I don't think that wall is going to bother him as much as some people think it will. I agree with the point I see a lot of other people make. He could be that right-handed power bat that provides a jolt to this lineup that it kind of desperately needs. I don't know. And we broke that. Go back and look through that Baseball America article, the StatCast standouts from a couple of weeks ago, and just you look at his patience. You look at fastballs up in the zone. We talked about how that was a struggle for Holiday. That's a big weakness for him. That's what Kobe Mayo feasts on. You give him fastballs up in the zone, they're gone. He waits. He waits and waits and waits. He does not chase pitches. he's going to when he gets up to the major leagues, right? He's going to face better quality stuff, like we just mentioned. He's going to have his struggles, but he is also an extremely patient, well-disciplined hitter. He waits for you to make a mistake and then he punishes it. I just, that ceiling with that bat is ginormous.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Mayo would be more of a difference maker in the lineup right now because of what that right-handed power can do. And we're going to break down a lot more things, Orioles, in our mailbag segment later on this week. We're going to talk a little bit about the trade deadline. We're going to talk about the draft and a whole lot more. So you're going to want to check that out. In the meantime, you can find us on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com, and you can sign up to become a member of our Patreon community for as little as $3 a month. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network.
Who wants a Magic Mind ad?
Do we have that this week?
No, we're done for right now.
Okay. All right. So for anyone watching live, we are still taking questions for the mailbag. So as we go along here, if a question comes to mind, go ahead and drop it in the comment on whatever channel you're watching this episode on, and we will get to it at some point during the broadcast. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we reopen our mailbag to take questions from our listeners about all things Orioles. And on tonight's episode, we're going to break down the potential playoff rotation, what the Orioles might or might not do at the trade deadline, the recent draft, and for some reason, we're going to be talking about the Hall of Fame. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we have a lot to get into on the mailbag and really a wide range of questions. And I'm just going to jump right in with this question from Catch a Beat, who's going to be making an appearance a few times in tonight's episode. He wants to know how much confidence on a scale of 1 to 10 do you have in an in-house option to start game 3 of a playoff series? So in other words, can't just grab random pitcher that's available right now in the trade market or even someone down in AAA. Looking at the current options, would you trust any of them to start game 3 of a postseason series? Start with Bob.
No, not really. No. I think I would actually trust Albert Suarez the most, even more than Dean Kramer. He gives like DGAF energy, so I don't know if he's going to be really bothered by the playoff atmosphere. I just think he's more of in control of his emotions. So I think he's just going to pitch how he pitches. And yeah, like Vivek says, maybe it is more of a quote unquote bullpen game, even though he's been a starter most of this year. Maybe he's like, he can give you 3-4 innings. Then you can look at Povich or I don't know, whoever's available at that point in time, McDermott, McGow, whoever, if we have to go solely in-house. But yeah, I don't really trust Kramer, or Suarez, or Povich, or Irvin. So yeah, got to acquire that game 3 starter.
Yeah. To answer Dental Office's question there in the chat, I am vibing on some Swishy Pants beer from a Dewey Beer Company. If you guys want to sponsor us, Dewey Beer, your beer is fantastic. I am going with, on a scale of 1 to 10, I think I'm going to be nice and say a 2. Like I want to trust Dean Kramer so bad. Like I do, but I just can't. And I don't want a rookie in that spot. I would like for Grayson Rodriguez to be our number 3. Maybe if a Scooble or a Crochet is acquired, but that would be ideal. But yeah, if either of those guys are not going to be the option, then I would like someone who is like they've been in the playoffs before. They've been there, they've done it, they know exactly what to expect. I would much more prefer to have that than Kramer. I like the Suarez point. He's probably not going to let things phase him. He's going to be pretty happy just to be in that situation. But yeah, I'm going to say a 2 and being kind of generous with that one, I think.
I didn't give a number, so I'll say 2.5.
Yeah, I'm going to land on a 2 also. And I think I've been one of the bigger defenders of Dean Kramer, at least on this show. But yeah, I would not want him in game 3 of a postseason series right now. And I actually would take Suarez over Kramer. The problem is that Suarez is already at 70 in the third innings this year, when the most he's ever thrown in a major league season is 84. So I don't know what we can expect from him in terms of length when the postseason comes around. So I absolutely think that the Orioles, and we'll get to this in a little bit, do need to address the rotation, and whether that starter or starters is in there in game 2 or game 3 of a series doesn't really matter to me, but it's clear that you're going to have something behind Corbin Burnes and Grayson Rodriguez, because you can't count on being up 2-0 in a series and have to turn the ball over to someone in game 3 when the momentum could swing the other way if things go bad for you.
Yeah. I know Lance Brzezowski's written a lot about Dean Kramer this year, about some real changes he's made, but it's just like I'm still waiting for the results to like really wow you, to trust him. We'll go here to the next question though, from Ben. Here's an absurd question. Ben's wording, not mine. But how many future Hall of Famers are on this team? And if you want to expand, who makes the Orioles Hall of Fame on the current team that's not Cooperstown bound? Let's start with Zach on this one.
Of the current roster, Corbin Burnes is the closest thing to a Hall of Famer. He's not a lock yet, but he's certainly on that trajectory. He's got a Cy Young award. He's been a very good pitcher to the stage in his major league career. If he continues to pitch well into his 30s, maybe wins another Cy Young award down the line, he's going to get into the Hall of Fame. I have to like what Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson are doing at this early stage in their career, but I'm not quite there yet on them being Hall of Famers. However, Orioles Hall of Fame, sure, they will be there, of the players on the active roster. If Cedric Mullins can rebound at some point before his tenure with the Orioles ends, I can see him in there as well. So those would be 3 that I would say that Mullins definitely won't be Cooperstown bound. Rutschman and Henderson just aren't at that threshold yet where we can talk about them in that way, but I could see them getting into the Orioles Hall of Fame. Oh, and then another point here, Craig Kimbrell, as a commenter on YouTube, John brought up. Yeah, Kimbrell probably is going to make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I was going to say there's 5 obvious ones. Adley, Gunnar, Burnes, Kimbrell, Keegan Aiken. So it's just 4 obvious ones. And then
which Hall of Fame are we talking about?
Well, that wasn't specified. But if you're talking Orioles Hall of Fame, Henderson, Rutschman, Mountcastle, Santander, Westberg, Mullins, Cowser, Kjerstad, maybe Hayes, maybe not. Rodriguez, Bradish, Kramer, Orioles Hall of Fame. I mean, in 20 years, more than half this roster will be on there. So
Santander's a lock. I don't know how I missed him, but yeah, Santander definitely will be there.
Yeah, I would say, especially if Santander is extended, he's an Orioles Hall of Famer. And if Mullins can rebound, like Zach said, he is an Orioles Hall of Famer. Kimbrell is for sure an MLB Hall of Famer. Burnes, and then, the other 2 obvious ones. Gunnar and Adley are trending towards potential Hall of Famers. Like, if Gunnar can win MVP, Rookie of the Year, and then MVP, or even if he comes in second place this year, and let's say Aaron Judge wins it, I think that's going to add a lot of fuel to Gunner's fire, which is dangerous. And like we said before, we haven't even seen peak Gunnar yet. That's not viewing this through orange-colored glasses. This isn't just because we're Orioles fans doing an Orioles podcast. I genuinely think that we have not yet even we can't even see the ceiling with Gunnar Henderson. So he's certainly trending that way. But yeah, it'd be cool. Santander is my favorite there. Like, man, extend this guy. Let's keep him around for a little bit longer. I'm going to keep pushing that train.
Yeah, I'd at least like to see qualifying offer extended, and maybe he accepts it. That would be ideal. Keep him around for one more year. Let him get paid a decent amount of money. But next question comes from Catch a Beat again, and he says, assuming it costs less than a Tariq Skubal or Garrett Crochet prospect haul to acquire him, should the Orioles trade in division and bring Kevin Gausman back? Zach?
I'm inclined to say no, just because of some of the health issues and some of the regression that we've seen from Gausman this year. I give him a lot of credit for the way that he's pitched in the last few years. But you look at some of the data this year for him: expected ERA 5.14, fastball velocity just not that impressive anymore. Typically 93.9 miles per hour. Chase rate and the walk percentage are still good, but everything else, it seems like hitters are squaring up on him more this year. He's not throwing as hard as he has in the past. So it's debatable whether he's even the pitcher on the Blue Jays that the Orioles would want to acquire at this stage. So, I think that you can get a better pitcher in that tier in terms of prospect return. If you give me a choice between Gausman and Eric Fetty, I would probably take Eric Fetty over Gausman at this stage.
Yeah, I love Gausman. I will still watch. I know I shouldn't say this on an Orioles podcast. I will watch Kevin Gausman starts when he's not playing the Blue Jays. When he's not playing the Orioles, I will watch Blue Jays games sometimes if Gausman's pitching. I love the guy as a prospect and glad he's found success in the big leagues. But I think for the haul that it would cost to acquire him, how many more years of control does he have? I don't know that off the top of my head.
2 after this year.
2. Yeah, like it's a no from me. Like Zach said, the fastball velo is down. It's down across the board. I'm pretty sure he entered the year with like shoulder issues or concerns. There was something at the very beginning of the year. And if you look at his Savant page, his four-seamer had a plus 16 run value last year. It's -3 this year. The split finger was a plus 4 run value last year. It's now -3. He's getting barreled more than ever. That's been trending up significantly year over year for like the last 4 years. I just don't know if I can trust him for the rest of that contract. And you're going to be paying a very big price that could – I'm all for giving up big pieces, as we're going to talk about probably in a minute. I'm all for giving up big pieces. You got to trade talent to acquire talent. But like it's the trust factor with Gausman. I don't know if it's there, and that it's an interdivision trade, and that talent could really haunt you for years to come, and that's going to really hurt if Gausman, something happens to the shoulder, he doesn't pan out for you, he doesn't help you, and that trade ends up being a major bust. So.
I'm actually not sure if it would cost that much. If baseball trade values is to be believed, his value is 0, like his salary and surplus, or there is no surplus. His value and his predicted stats or whatever they measured out equals out to 0. So I would happily send Errol Robinson or Logan Reinhart over to the Blue Jays to take that salary off their hands, as long as we also acquired another pitcher as well. I wouldn't mind him as like a reclamation project as an older guy, but I agree with Garrett in the chat. The Blue Jay pitcher I would prefer is Yusei Kikuchi, even though he's been struggling lately. I just like his stuff from the left-hand side in Baltimore.
We'll go to our next question now. Sticking with the trade deadline, or actually going in a different direction here with the draft. With this front office's propensity to take position players, if the O's had the first pick in 2023, would they have passed on Paul Skeens to select Dylan Cruz? That comes from Billy B. And I'm going to throw a layer of complexity onto Billy B's question. We have the draft lottery in place. It's been in place since last year. Let's suppose that the Orioles, 83 and 79 in 2022, just like what happened in real life, they were draft lottery eligible for 2023. Instead of landing at 17, they land at 1-1. 2023, they're in the same playoff chase that they were in real life. Now they're going to draft 1-1 and push for the playoffs at the same time. does that factor into the front office's decision? So I guess it's really a two-part question here, and a good one, but I'm going to just throw that onto it.
Yeah. Changed my mind when you add that extra layer. And this is not also it's extremely hard. It's almost impossible because we're watching what Paul Skeens is doing in the major leagues right now. It's phenomenal. I love it for baseball to see a young guy like this succeeding so early. But my original answer was no, just because maybe you save some money by taking Skeens over Cruz, which is what I think the Pirates was a major factor for the Pirates. Cruz, I imagine you would have had to give a little bit more to because he was the expected 1-1. I think you got Skeens you were able to shave a little bit off his signing bonus, but that elite SEC up the middle bat, Team USA success. Shout out to the MLB Draft Discord chat. Team USA, power, speed, defense, just an unbelievable prospect. I don't think it would have been a terribly difficult decision, but when you add that extra layer on, I do wonder if you maybe push a few extra chips in and say, maybe this guy could be an asset for us. Even if he's not the Paul Skeens we know today, that's a bullpen piece for you for the playoff run. So that does change my mind, though.
I would like to say that they would take Skeens there, but I don't think so either. I actually think they would have taken Wyatt Langford and saved even more money for later in the draft. So I'm going option C, Wyatt Langford.
Those were both good choices, and I had thought about Langford. Ultimately, I feel like they're going to stick with Cruz because it fits the model of up the middle player who's kind of five toolish, and I think Dylan Cruz is going to have a really good major league career. It's just that Paul Skeens has ascended at a rate that few prospects before him ever have, and he's going to be a good pitcher for a long time. But I think Cruz is going to hold up. And as for what the Orioles would have done, I don't think a pennant race last year would have changed it because even if they had drafted Skeens, I don't think they would have brought him up to the major leagues, considering how they used didn't use their college pitchers coming out of the draft last year. I think that Skeens probably would have started this year in Norfolk and would be in the majors now, and he would certainly make this team better. But I don't think he would have changed the course of last season.
Draft revisionist history is fun to think about, especially the later you go on. But next question comes from Chris Resitar on the most recent draft class. He's asking, do you guys find it at all interesting that a guy like Nate George, who was the 16th round pick, it's in the question, keep reading, who seems to be getting a lot of hype, went in the 16th round despite clearly communicating an intention to sign a pro contract? Yeah, there was an article before the draft, I think came out from a local paper where he gave a quote that said he had every intention of going pro. And if he wasn't drafted, he was going to go the JUCO route. That's why I think he was committed to a D1 school and then decommitted from that right, but like 2 weeks before the draft. I don't know. Do you guys find it at all interesting? Do you like the Nate George pick? Thoughts?
I like the Nate George pick. I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I'm sure he was just excited. He wants to be a professional baseball player. Who doesn't when they're growing up playing baseball? And just because he gets drafted, he says that if I get drafted, I have every intention of signing. That doesn't mean that there might not be a number that he's wanting or hoping to get there. I don't know. Maybe he was in communication with a team already, and it was like, if you're there, we'll take you. Here's what we'll give you, a ballpark figure. And he was just excited. I don't know, but I'm happy to have him. I'll say that. I'm glad he's in the Orioles player development system, no matter which round he's in. I hope he signs. And I was also happy to see that DJ Layton expects to sign, intends to sign before August 1st as well. So it's a little interesting, but ultimately I don't think it really means much as far as how good he is or is going to be.
There's no question that George has a lot of interesting tools, his speed especially. He's a very athletic player. And from everything I've been able to read, and Nick, I know you broke this down on the day 3 recap last week, it seems like the makeup with him is really high. So you take out two things that could be a factor otherwise for him causing the drop, which is signability concerns and makeup concerns. When I look at him, though, I do think that he is really raw at this stage. And in that sense, I'm not surprised that he fell to day 3. Joe Doyle, in his pre-draft report on him, noted that there are some questions about the hit tool. I found that from other sources as well. And Joe Doyle also pointed out that his defense, even with his speed and his arm, still probably a little rough around the edges because his routes to the ball aren't always very crisp. That's something a player development system can fix in no time. But when you look at the questions about the bat, I don't think it's terribly surprising that he fell to day 3. I could have seen him as a back end day 2 pick, but I don't think it's terribly surprising that he fell to day 3. That he fell as far as he did in the day 3, the 16th round. I would have thought he would have gone a little bit earlier, but I don't think that there's much to it because he is a raw player coming from a cold weather state in the Midwest. And then by comparison, DJ Layton, there's some questions about his game, but he's coming from a baseball hotbed in the Southeast. A lot of reports really like his defense. So there's a reason why I think Layton went day 2, whereas George fell to day 3.
Yeah, could just be how the boards shook out. Like I don't see anything with it, to be honest. Different teams value different traits, and Zach mentioned some of the pros and cons there with George, and clearly I think the Orioles were just higher on George than other teams and decided to take a shot, roll the dice there with high schoolers. You didn't see a lot of high schoolers taken in this draft. It's fewer and fewer, so I like it. I guess we'll stick with a current draft question there. From Simpkins says, Brody Brecht, Iowa right-hander, went 300K over slot. Does that explain why they didn't pick him? If you watched our live stream, we were getting excited because he fell to 32, and everyone saw our extreme disappointment when it was, Griff O'Farrell, and not Brody Brecht. Love you, Griff. But yeah, I don't know. Do you guys think that played a role in it? Money is a big driving factor in this draft, or do you think it was the control issues? Do you think the Orioles just said that's too much?
I mean, it's impossible to know, but I'm sure it played some factor. I mean, you saved some money with O'Farrell. If you would have had to go over slot there with Brecht, it changes the whole trajectory of the board. Probably a combination of things, but I'm sure it played a factor.
Yeah, I think it falls somewhere in the middle because 300,000 over slot is not that big of an ask if you really like the player. But I think the Orioles, they got their target in Vance Honeycutt. I don't have any doubts about that with their first pick. And it's going to take slot money to sign him probably. But they could have trimmed somewhere further down the draft if they had really wanted Brecht. And I think that maybe they just were really worried about the command concerns and they saw reliever risk there. And that kind of backed them off. So it could be a combination of the two. It could be the bonus demands, and it could be that they just weren't as high on him as we were, or maybe some in the industry were.
Yeah. I mean, they did draft the 3 high school kids, so I wonder if were those super high priority targets for the team, and they wanted to make sure they had a few extra dollars. I don't think either the Nate George or I don't even remember the kid's name, the last high school kid they drafted, to be honest. Whitaker was his last name. From North Carolina. Braylon Whitaker, North Carolina. Shout out Colgate for Garrett. I don't know. I don't see either of the high school kids getting huge bonuses, but if those are high priority targets, you probably just want every dollar you can get. So.
All right, move on to another question from Catch a Beat. He says, going into the 2020 season, terrible season for many reasons. No minor league baseball, very shortened baseball schedule, COVID. 29-year-old Garrett Cole received 9 years, $324 million, which came out to $36 million per year from the Yankees. Given the rising cost of pitching since 2020, what could Corbin Burns, who turns 30 in October, command this offseason? Nick?
I have no clue, but I will pass along these 2 numbers I found. I don't know if you guys saw these as well. These came out before the season started. One from The Athletic. They did a projection series about what contracts could look like for guys on expiring deals. And The Athletic put 7 years, $185 million for Burns. And then Dan Zimborski over at Fangraphs a couple weeks later, he put out an article doing the same thing, and he looked at 8 years, $210 million. Yeah, so I don't know, take those numbers for what you will as a baseline.
I will add that the caveat with the higher annual average value has come with shorter term contracts for players like Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. That hasn't been true across the board, but we have seen that trend in the last few years with pitchers. And I wonder how if there's this part of Burns that wants to be the guy that goes out and gets 7, 8 years guaranteed, as opposed to a 3 or 4 year contract that's going to be worth 40 plus million. Because he could easily get that. I think you would find a lot of teams willing to give him 3 years, 42, 44 million to pitch for them. But when you start to get into that 7 to 8 year range, it becomes a little bit more complicated. All that said, when we had Danielle Allentuck and Andy Costco on the show back before the season started, Danielle had written about this point and used Garrett Cole's contract as a baseline for what Burns might command in the offseason. And we talked about it with her on the show, and I do agree. I think that he's going to aim for something around the Garrett Cole contract, maybe a little bit more average annual value, but I think the years are going to be a factor. So I wouldn't be shocked if the AAV ends up somewhere between what Garrett Cole got and what Justin Verlander got from the Mets a couple years ago, which was $43.3 million, or the $42 million that Zach Wheeler is getting from the Phillies. But I suspect that the year is going to be a big priority for Burns.
Yeah, those numbers, especially from Zaborski, it seemed a little light as far as the AAV goes. I mean, I'd give him 7 years, 235 million, but it's not my money. Yeah, I think he'll probably end up getting like 8 years. Let me do some quick math. 280, like 35 million a year over 8 years. I could see him getting something like that. And, maybe the Orioles say, hey, we're rich now. Let's do this. But I tend to doubt it. I think they'll just offer him the qualifying offer and take the draft pick and hopefully fill his spot at the top of the rotation somewhere else, whether it's at this trade deadline with Tarik Skubal or Garrett Crochet, or if it's someone else in the offseason.
And that's a good segue here. This question from Bird is a word. If you were Mike Elias, what would you be willing to give up for Tarik Skubal, or who would you be willing to give up? I'll start with Nick here.
I go back and forth here with this one. It's because I don't anticipate Corbin Burns being an Oriole next year. I don't think the Orioles did when they acquired him. And if you go out and you get a guy like Skubal, they are clearly having discussions, questions about, have discussions already dissipated when it comes to Skubal, and they've worked their way down to other pitchers on the Tigers roster. Don't know. But you can't argue that he has been one of the premier pitchers in all of baseball since he returned from his injury. I really don't care. No, let me think about that. Erase that part. I don't want to push all the chips in, but I think Jackson Holliday is off the table. And if you want Mayo and Basayo, I think I'm out. But I would be willing to go Mayo or Basayo plus pretty much whatever you want after that. Like, build a big package, but as long as Holiday is off the table and the Orioles keep either one of Mayo or Basayo, give them pretty much whatever else they want in terms of like prospects. If we start talking about like Kerstad, Westberg range, that gets a little hairy, a little bit more difficult, I think. But if you're talking about just prospects, yeah, I would be willing to part with that. I go back and forth on how aggressive I want the Orioles to be with this deal, because I really want Skubal. I really want those when Burns is gone next year, like there's your ace. Because if Burns is gone and you don't trade for the ace this trade deadline, do they have to? No. It would be huge to go Corbin Burns, Tarik Skubal, Grayson Rodriguez. Who else is touching that playoff rotation? That's lethal. Then of course the bats are going to go cold for that 1 week. They just need to not go cold and it's all be for nothing. But I just look ahead to next year, and if Burns is gone, like, who's your number one starter going into the offseason? Dean Kramer? Like, it's rough. Bradish isn't coming back next year. Burns not being back. Like, I don't know. So that's part of me is like, let's go hard for Skubal. But I don't see the Orioles being super aggressive there.
I also love Skubal. Would love to have him. At the same time, I'm just not sold that the Tigers are going to trade him. I don't necessarily see it. They don't have to do it right now. He's under control for 2 more years after this year, unless they're nervous that he's going to get hurt again and they want to strike while the iron's hot. But personally, for me, I'm just not willing to trade our top 3 prospects. I'm not willing to trade Holiday, Mayo, or Basayo. I think they are elite prospects that we would regret if we lost them, even if it is for a great pitcher like that. But what I would be willing to do, and I will preface this by saying, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think the Orioles are going to trade a guy that is a big contributor to the current major league lineup, because it kind of, I don't know, defeats the purpose in a way. But the most I would be willing to do is headline with Jordan Westburg. And I love what Westburg is providing for the Orioles. I just think he's a little bit of a regression candidate. I'm not sure he's going to continue to keep up this level of production going forward. I think he'll still be really good, but I think he's got like a 120 something WRC plus. He's only walking 5% of the time. I think there's a little too much swing and miss to his game. I'm just much more confident in Holiday, Mayo, Basayo, even Kerstad at providing value at the bat. And obviously Westburg is a good base runner. He's good in the clubhouse. He's a great defender at second base and a little bit less, but still pretty good at third base. So love the guy, but for what it would take, I would lead with him. You do Westburg, Connor Norby, Dylan Beavers, Enrique Bradfield, and their pick between Cade Povich and Chase McDermott. And that's as high as I'm willing to go.
Realistically, any discussion with Tarek Skubal is going to have to start with one of the players in the top 3 of the organization. So Holiday, Basayo, and Mayo. And I'm okay with that, but I cringe every time I see a hypothetical trade scenario between the Orioles and Tigers for Tarek Skubal, where the Orioles put all of the chips on the table to get one guy. To me, you're just setting yourself up to fail if you do that. So if I can put in Holiday, but we're not talking another prospect until we get down to the Judd Fabian tier of players, I would do that. But I'm not giving you Holiday and Mayo. I'm not giving you Holiday and Kerstad. I'm not giving you Holiday and Cade Povich. There's a line there for me because for as good as Tarek Skubal has been this year, one of the things to consider is that the Tigers are trading him with a lot of leverage. They don't have to trade him. And not to mention, we've talked about, innings totals a few times as trade candidates. His career high in the season, 149 the third. As Bob mentioned, there is a little bit of an injury history. So if you're concerned long term about how he's going to hold up, that's got to factor into what you're willing to get back. I would absolutely include one of the top 3, like I said, but from there on, you've got to play a little bit conservative. You can't just throw all your chips on the table in one trade because you want to get him because Corbin Burns is going to leave in the offseason. This is not how you should do business. And I think that I would be a little bit more restrained in my approach where, okay, you're getting the best prospect in baseball in Jackson Holliday. That in and of itself is a great return. Here's the rest of the players we're willing to part with. Or you're going to get Kobe Mayo. You can plug him in your lineup right now, and he's going to make your team better, and he's going to make your team better for the next 6 years. Good for you. Again, let's pull back a little bit and go down to the Dylan Beavers and Judd Fabians of the organization, where we start talking about who else is going to be included in this deal.
Yeah.
I don't want to buy a Tigers jersey.
Baseball America had an article out too. I think it was released today, but just reading the preview tweet, over the last 10 years, only 2 prospects ranked in the top 10 have been traded before the deadline. The A's shortstop Addison Russell, who's number 5 in 2014, and Cubs outfielder Eloy Jimenez, who was number 5 in 2017. Jackson Holliday is not getting traded, like point blank period. Mayo's 12, Basayo's 16 on Baseball America's list. I also have a very, very hard time. I would personally part with one of them, but I don't see the organization parting with either of them. And yet someone else made a really good point too, in that, and I think this was a Tigers fan, when looking at all the reports, take them for what you will, about the Dodgers and Orioles, right? When it comes to Tarek Skubal and the Orioles having an advantage. One thing the Orioles, I think, have an advantage on a lot of other systems when it comes to deals. There are a lot of prospects outside of the big 3. They have a lot of very near or a lot of major league ready or very near major league ready prospects that a lot of other organizations like can't compete with. Like the Dodgers, a lot of their top prospects are in the low levels of the minor leagues. A lot of Connor Norby, Dylan Beavers, like Judd Fabian, Dylan Beavers and Judd Fabian should be in AAA right now. There's a lot of talent backlogged on that AA roster that should be in AAA pushing for major league time already. That could be a huge advantage for the Orioles, I think, where you don't have to deal from the top three and you should be able to land. This isn't just like, oh, we're giving up too much for this guy because like we value our prospects more. I think they genuinely could command a pretty decent return with these lower ranked prospects.
Yeah, and I can certainly see the argument for giving up one. I can't see the argument for more than one of the top three, but I could see the argument for giving up a Holiday, a Basayo, a Mayo for a guy like Skubal. I think it's just personally too risky for me. I'll take the risk averse position player prospect for 6 or 7 years that I think has an elite bat over an arm that could get hurt at any moment. And yeah, it could be the thing that pushes you over the edge, but at the same time, the playoffs are a crapshoot, and you might have Skubal has a bad start, offense goes cold. Like, I'd rather trade lesser prospects, which are still gonna hurt to give away, a guy like Beavers, Fabian, etc., but even Norby. But I'll take the rentals for a cheaper price and then pick my battles later when look at 2025 in the offseason and see how we can improve there.
Here's the thing. You still have Corbin Burns at the top of your rotation going in the playoffs as long as he stays healthy. You could get Eric Fetty and improve your playoff rotation. If that's a concern, you don't have to trade for Tarek Skubal. You don't have to trade for Garrett Crochet. Would I like to see one of those two guys in an Orioles uniform? Yes, but for the purpose of long-term planning, it might be better to be in that tier for an Eric Fetty type as opposed to the top of the market for two pitchers who frankly might not even be traded.
Completely agreed.
Yeah. I like that. I know, take the results for what you will, but the Reds trading off their expiring contracts. You're not getting Nick Lodolo. You're not getting Hunter Green. That's a fun young team in Cincinnati. Injuries hit them hard this year, but trading off the expiring contracts makes a lot of sense. And then you got Rock saying, "Oh, there were scouts at Delmarva this weekend." I know scouts are everywhere right now, but like you want one of those guys that they've got up for trade for Braylon Tavera? See you, Braylon. Like pretty much anyone on that Delmarva roster for a proven major league arm to even help.
Don't touch Aaron Estrada though, please. Personally.
That one's a little iffy. I get like Juan Rojas and there's another pitcher I was thinking of.
Yeah, let's keep that
but
Jorge Lopez trade the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, they're like two pitchers on Delmarva that I'm keeping, but like pretty much anyone else. You want Braylon Tavera, you want Anderson De Los Santos, love you, guy, but see ya. Like you make those kind of trades, will that be enough to help get you through? I don't know. I think that's where the Orioles are going to end up going, and a lot of people are going to be extremely pissed off.
Acquiring Yudis Mordan and watch your Twitter mentions explode when he takes a little bit too long to get around the plate on a home run. So think about that, Cincinnati, if you're listening to this. We'll go now. We'll wrap up this segment because we have to shout out something really good that happened in the minor leagues last week, and that was Aberdeen's combined no-hitter, a 4-0 win over the Wilmington Blue Rocks. Zach Fruit started things out for the Ironbirds as they used 4 pitchers to complete the no-hitter. Fruit went 4 2/3 innings before being followed in relief by Davey Cruz, then Preston Johnson, and Kyle Verbitsky. And it was a great night for Aberdeen's pitching staff overall. And in addition to no-hitting Wilmington, they struck out in a combined 11 batters while walking just 3. And Johnson in that department had the best night of anybody, fanning 5 batters in 2 innings of work with no walks allowed. So congratulations to the Ironbirds and these 4 hurlers on their excellent performance against Wilmington last week.
Zach Fruit is getting ripe. I think he's getting better and better as the season goes on. You better promote him to AA before he gets too ripe, and I don't know, some kind of fruit metaphor. Preston Johnson, I'm very interested in him. I think he's going to be a breakout candidate for next year. Another year removed from Tommy John surgery, I think his command is going to get better, or at least his control. Strikeout stuff has been there all year round. It's just been kind of like Kyle Bronovich, not the command that you would expect or want from a guy like him, but hopefully that will continue to improve as he gets further away from surgery. So, yeah, it was cool stuff. Verbitsky, he had a lot of success in Aberdeen last year, and nice to see him be a part of this as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, a pretty awesome moment for all those guys. Fruit, because he's a very young, promising prospect. Started out strong, had a tough month of May, kind of cooled off, but you're making tweaks. It's first year of pro ball. You're in high A. He's been stronger than ever in July. 14 innings, 2 runs allowed, 13 strikeouts, just 3 walks. He could end his first year of pro ball in Double A and as like a top 30 fringe top 30 prospect in this organization. And he was a 9th round pick out of Troy last year. Davy Cruz, like shout out Davy Cruz. It's been a brutal year. The walks are through the roof. He's clearly just the mop up guy. When the starter can't make it out of the 3rd inning, Davy Cruz is there to get the final out. That's his night. And sometimes he walks 4 guys before he gets that 1 out. That's all he needs to do. It's been a tough year, so good for him to experience that. I agree. Like Johnson's essentially making his pro debut this year. Drafted in 2022, had Tommy John surgery, so missed 2023. Beginning his pro career in high A. Strikeouts have been there, like Bob said, just getting his feet wet after missing a full year. So I'm on board the 2023. He could be pretty intriguing. Wouldn't be shocked if he's like in a piggyback role in Bowie to start the year. And Verbitsky, yeah, like fantastic year in Aberdeen last year after coming over with Cole Irvin in the Dale Hernandez trade. Started the year in Bowie and did not go well for him. Got demoted to Aberdeen. So at least he starts off the second portion, the final stretch of the season here, as part of a no-hitter. And shout out to the catcher behind the plate, Adam Retzbach. Yeah, shout out to all those guys. And if you guys have anything about that, I want to shout out the DSL All-Stars real quick. We didn't really talk about that. It was actually like a 2-2 game. Not a ton happened. Not too interesting, but it was, I already lost the tweet. It was 2-2 tie game because I don't know why they just can't get a winner. It's a DSL All-Star game. I'm just vamping, trying to find the guys here. Jordan Sanchez made the game. We've talked a lot about him this year. Cuban outfielder the Orioles just signed. He went 0 for 2. And then it was shortstop Elvin Garcia, who we've talked about a couple of times as well. OPS in over 1,000 this year with more walks and strikeouts. He went 1 for 1 with a single, I believe. And then Henry Tejada made the All-Star game. Tejada pitched 0.2 innings, gave up 2 unearned runs, had a couple strikeouts. So shout out to Henry Tejada. Kind of interesting because Tejada missed all of 2023 because he was suspended for a performance-enhancing drug. And now he's a DSL All-Star. But shout out to those guys.
We'll go with one last question on the night, a late entry into the mailbag here before we wrap up, and it comes from Kevin Mack on YouTube. Do you see any promotions this week, or do you think they'll wait until August? And that, of course, means minor league promotions.
I kind of expected some out of the All-Star break, and then I thought, all right, well, maybe they're just going to wait till the Monday after the All-Star break, but usually we would have heard something by now, I feel like. So, yeah, maybe they are waiting till August 1st area after the trade deadline, like we said, kind of clear some of that elite talent pipeline blockage at the top and then let things kind of coast up as they should. Yeah, I think that's why we were talking about this before we even went on air tonight, where it's just there's so much talent top to bottom through this organization that the promotions have definitely been stingy this year. And hopefully we see those trickle in before the end of the year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Enrique Bradfield Jr. should be in Double A, but hard to get him playing time if he were to move up. Judd Fabian and Dylan Beavers should be in Triple A, but Triple A's got Stowers, Hudson Haskin, Billy Cook on that outfield up there. That's a crowded outfield. I think it's probably wait and see between trades, who gets moved, who doesn't, who they can move to the development list, who gets cut, because depending on how many guys, as they start to sign these draft picks, if they get added to Delmarva's roster, well, someone's got to either be put on the 60-day IL or go to the development list or with this roster limit. So I think it's gonna wait and see, get all the draft picks signed, let the trade deadline pass, and then do the shakeup from there.
And also FCL promotions will count against that number as well. So maybe we don't see as many as we would like to just for that reason alone. So
Yeah, if you listen to the show every week and you're thinking to yourself, how come we're not hearing as much about promotions? It's not just you. It really has been slower this year compared to previous years. It's been about 2 months ago, we had a whole episode devoted to recent pitcher promotions. Outside of Matthew Etzel going from Aberdeen to Bowie, I think it's been really slow. And even that move came on June 11th. So it's been a while since we've had a notable promotion within the minor leagues. I agree with you guys. I think that probably either next week or the week after, we'd start to see some promotions, get through the trade deadline, more draft picks signed, more undrafted free agents signed, although the Orioles have already signed plenty of them. And you're going to start to see some cuts. You might see some guys go on the development list, and it's going to clear the backlog up a little bit. You're still going to have a handful of players that you look at these rosters at the end of the year, and you're like, how is this guy in that level for that long? It's inevitably going to happen, but things are going to loosen up here.
Yeah, I just want to argue with Simkin real quick. No obvious FCL promotion candidates. I disagree. Edwin Amparo, Miguel Rodriguez, Ellis Cuevas, they deserve to be in Delmarva once the season ends, but we can talk about that more next week.
There's also just a lot with the FCL to Delmarva thing. Like, who from Delmarva is going to go up to Aberdeen? There are a couple of pitchers I could see moving up.
Estrada.
But like outside of Estrada, like there are a lot of guys who are very young for the level. I think that's another thing too that's hindered some promotions. We've kind of reached this point where like it's okay if Basayo spends a few extra weeks in Bowie because he's 19 years old. Like I think you're seeing that at all levels. There's a lot of guys who are extremely young for their level, and so it seems like they're taking extra time down there. So I don't know.
I could potentially see Creed Willems to AA, Mordon to high A, and then Miguel Rodriguez to low A, but that's iffy.
And who knows, we might have more to talk about next week, but one thing we know that we're going to be discussing on next week's show is the trade deadline, because we're going to be on Monday night, one night before the July 30th trade deadline this year. So you're not going to want to miss that. We might be breaking down trades that already happened, discussing trades that could happen or won't happen. So you're not going to want to miss that. And we've been known around deadline time to do an emergency podcast or two. So keep your eye out over the next week, because if a big deal does go down, all three of us, or at least one or two of us, might hop on and give you a bonus episode. And where can you find that? You can find news about that on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, YouTube, and TikTok. We're also over at Substack and OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And if you sign up to become a member of our Patreon community, you get bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself. That kicks in when you sign up to the $5 level. At the $3 level, you'll have a shout out on this show, access to our bonus Discord channels, and more. And who knows, maybe if there is a bonus episode in the next week or so, patrons will get it first, or they'll get a little bit more insight there. We'll have to see. But that's all to learn here in the next week or so. In the meantime, for Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network.